This happened shortly after I first got my driver's license. I was about 16 years old. Back then, I was driving an old car that my parents didn't use anymore. I was really lucky to have a car that I could drive right after getting my license because I couldn't afford to buy one on my own. During that time, I had a job at a store about 15 minutes away from where we lived. I was glad that I was able to drive myself to and from work because in the past, I needed to get a ride from my parents. Probably 2 weeks or so after getting my license, I was driving home from work one night. I got off at 10 p.m., so it was probably a little bit past then. The roads weren't too busy anymore, and I took the highway back most of the way. When I pulled off of the highway to another road, a car pulled off behind me. But it wasn't until my next turn that I thought anything of it. I turned a little bit late onto that road, not on purpose, but because that turn just kind of snuck up on me a bit. I was really new to driving and made little mistakes like that. So, when I turned, the car behind me suddenly turned right after me. It was only then that I realized how strange it was. They would only do that if they were intentionally following me. I drove down the road with the car behind me. It wasn't right behind me or anything, just a normal distance. I had about 3 more turns to make before my street. Soon, I made the first one, and the car did the same each time I turned. I was hoping to see the car just keep driving, but it didn't. By the time I was getting close to my street, I was extremely worried. I wanted to call my parents and tell them what was going on. Unfortunately, I didn't have a cell phone at the time. I also didn't want to drive home. If I did, whoever was behind me would know where we lived, and I didn't know who this person was. I was debating what to do, but when my street came, I turned onto it. It was something that I instantly regretted because the car turned right after me. Our street was pretty quiet. There were only like 15 houses on it, and it was a cul-de-sac. As I got closer to my house, I knew that I wasn't going to turn into the driveway. When I got to the cul-de-sac, I drove around it and then went back down my street. The car behind me followed just as they had been the entire time. After I made it off of the street and back onto a slightly busier one, I knew that I had to think of something. I drove down that road for a little ways and then decided that I would go to a busier area. The area that my house was in was pretty quiet. There was a lot of land and not as many businesses or people around in general. I started heading back towards where I worked. I didn't know exactly where I was going to go, but I just wanted to get to a busier area. I would feel safer with more people around. Maybe I would drive all the way to the city, but I certainly was not going to stop anywhere around my house. I followed the directions to my job. Like I said, I didn't have a cell phone, so that also meant that I could only go places that I already knew directions to. I didn't have access to a map or anything to guide me. I remember that I made it all the way back to my job and then turned into the parking lot. It was a shopping center with multiple stores in it. The car first turned in behind me, but then suddenly turned off and drove away. I was really surprised but didn't take any time in driving as far as I could away from it. I went to the other side of the parking lot and took a route that wrapped around back to the highway that I needed to take to get home. When I drove home, I was very careful to look and make sure that I wasn't followed. I got home okay, and my parents were wondering why I was late. I told them about what had happened. They said that if that ever happened again, to go to a police station, which I wish I would have thought of, although I didn't know where one was off the top of my head and would have needed a map. After that, I got a phone only about a week later. Nothing remotely close to that has happened since. One time, a few months ago, I was driving my car late at night. I was on a quiet road, driving about 5 miles per hour above the speed limit. The road had just 2 lanes, one for traffic going the way I was and the other for oncoming traffic. I was just trying to get home and listening to the radio. I remember at one point I came up on a smaller pickup truck driving up ahead. When I approached it, I slowed down because the truck was driving much slower than I was. But soon, things got kind of ridiculous. The speed limit on this road was 50 miles per hour, and we were going almost 30 miles per hour. I remained behind the truck, going very slowly, for 2 or 3 minutes. Then, I decided that I would pass the truck. Maybe something was wrong with it, and it couldn't go very fast. I wasn't in a big hurry or anything, but going that much slower than the speed limit, I lost patience. I pulled out into the oncoming lane of traffic. Luckily, These roads were really quiet, and nobody was coming in the other direction at all. I started to pass the truck easily, but before I could clear it, the truck started speeding up. I was going about 55, and soon the truck was going at least 55 as well. This made me really angry. I sped up even more, and was finally able to clear the truck now that I was in front of him. But unfortunately, the truck was now right on my tail. His headlights were so close I wondered if his truck would bump into my car. It looked like a man was driving, but I couldn't really see all that well. Luckily, the truck didn't bump mine. Still, as I was going now 60 miles per hour, which was 10 over the limit, he was still right behind me. We both drove like this for maybe about a minute. When I saw that he hadn't let up at all, I decided that it would be best to just let him pass. I had to drive on this road for maybe another 5 miles or so, and there weren't any other roads to turn onto in the immediate area. So I decided to just pull over. I put on my hazard lights and moved over to the side of the road. As soon as I did, the truck behind me did as well. Now I was really mad. Was this guy angry with me for trying to pass him, and now he was following me? He had been going so slow, anybody would have done the same thing I did. I kept slowing down, and my car came to a stop. The truck did as well. We both sat there in our vehicles for a few seconds. I was angry, and I guess I was feeling like a tough guy. I decided I was going to get out and talk to the driver of the truck and ask him what his problem was. I opened up my door and started walking towards the truck. When I did, I held out my hands as if to say, "What's your problem?" I remember that as I was doing that and I was barely in the street, I saw the truck suddenly start to move. It was then that I realized this guy was going to try to run me over. The truck was driving straight for me. I ran back, but was only able to take about 3 steps. I then jumped and actually landed on the hood of my own car. The truck barely missed me and luckily didn't hit my car either. After he had missed, I saw him slamming on the brakes up ahead. I quickly jumped into my vehicle and started driving away. The guy in his truck then started following me again as soon as he got the chance. He was once again right on my tail, but driving more reckless than before. I was driving on the street, but then went to the far side of the road. The man swerved after me but went too far, and his truck ended up going off the road and into the ditch, the sort of big ditch. The truck didn't flip or anything, but it was enough to get him stuck. I kept driving and then called the police when I was a good distance away. They ended up locating the man, and he got a ticket for reckless driving. But I was unable to prove that he tried to run me over. I just hope I never see him again. This happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. I travel a lot for work and usually drive from the different locations. I was about 5 hours away from home at this time and was going to be driving back when I had finished with work at that location. I left to drive home at about 6 p.m. I knew that I would be getting home really late, but I had the next few days off, so I didn't mind the long day. Hours of driving went by very smoothly. I had the directions all set up on my phone through Apple Maps. I was making great time and felt like I would get home a little bit sooner than I expected. But at one point, maybe 3 hours into the drive, I was told to take an exit by my phone. This confused me a little, but I knew I had the directions in it, so I followed what it told me to do. I ended up driving on this quiet road for like 20 minutes, and then it told me to take a left. When I did that, this road looked even quieter than the previous one. I realized that my signal was starting to go out as well. Luckily, the map was still working, though I was getting really confused. So I pulled over on the side of the road and grabbed my phone to take a look at the map. I realized that it had automatically rerouted me because of potential flooding. It wasn't even raining, but there had been a lot of rain in the area the past few days. The road that I was on was extremely quiet and looked to be in the middle of nowhere. I kept the directions up because if I cancelled them to start over, I would not have any due to me not having a signal. I merged my car back onto the empty road and continued to follow the route home, which was now on back roads. Probably a minute later, my car dinged. I saw that I was almost out of gas. I kept driving and decided that I would look out for a gas station up ahead. I was sure that I would see one, but the more I drove, it was just the same grass and some trees on both sides of the road. 30 minutes or so went by, and I was still driving on that quiet road with no gas station in sight. My tank was really low at this point, and I was getting nervous. I got desperate, and I turned off of the road that I was on, hoping that another road would lead me to a gas station. My phone started rerouting again, and after that, I had no signal, and the map wouldn't load. I took another turn at my next opportunity, and now I was just making things worse. I turned around and went back to the first road that I had been on after realizing I was going into an even quieter area. Shortly after I got onto that road, my car came to a stop. I'd completely run out of fuel. Now, my car was stopped on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere with no signal. I had not seen any other car since I had been driving down this road. It was almost 10 p.m. I sat in my car trying to get my phone to work. I restarted it, but I still couldn't get a signal. Then, I saw headlights in the distance coming up behind me. I considered getting out of my car and trying to ask for help, but I ultimately decided not to. The car passed me by. That was the first car that I had seen on this road. I kept sitting inside of my car, wondering what I should do in this situation. I then noticed brake lights on the car that had passed me by. Now it was sort of a long ways up the road, but it appeared to be stopping. It sat on the road for a minute or so. I thought this was strange. Then it looked like it was starting to turn around. After that, I lost sight of it. Maybe 30 seconds later, I saw the car again. It was driving up on the other side of the road now, but its headlights were off. I was confused and wondered what exactly they were doing. They'd parked on the other side of the road about 50 feet up from my car. I kept my eyes on them as the driver's door started to open. I saw a man step out and start to walk in the direction of my car. It was really dark, and I couldn't see very well, but as he got closer, I could see that this man was wearing what looked like a ski mask on his face. I had a really bad feeling when it was clear that he was walking to my car. I decided I needed to leave. I took my phone, keys, and wallet and moved over into the passenger seat. Then I opened the door as quietly as I could, swung the door open, and ran into the grass on the side of the road. There was a bit of woods, and I ran for it. I could barely hear the person starting to run in my direction. I ran deeper and deeper into the woods. I kept going for as long as I could. When I was running, I thought I heard noise in the woods behind me, and I knew that the man was chasing after me. He was a ways back, but I knew I needed to run as fast as I possibly could. I was getting whacked by tree branches left and right. After probably 10 minutes of this, I found a spot that looked good for hiding. I wasn't really hearing the noises behind me anymore, so I decided I would hide there. I took a large stick and tossed it deeper into the direction that I had been running in the thick woods. Then, I quietly hid myself behind a large log that was sort of broken. It had probably been sheltered to an animal, but it was a good place for me to hide. Now, I heard a few noises in the woods a long ways back. It was pretty quiet. So, more time went by, and things became very quiet. I kept waiting there for probably 30 minutes. Then, I finally felt safe enough to leave my hiding spot. I walked back through the woods, trying to go in the same direction that I had come from. After about another half hour of walking, I finally made it back to the road. I was tired from all the running and walking through the woods. Luckily, I didn't see the other car on the road when I got back. I was a little ways down from my car, and I walked back to it. As I was approaching my car, I saw headlights coming again. At first, I was about to run back into the woods, thinking that it might be the same guy. But I realized that these headlights were much bigger and those of a truck instead of a car. I decided to stay by my car. The truck actually slowed down and came to a stop behind me. A man got out, who turned out to be a really nice guy who lived in the area. I told him about running out of gas, and he happened to have a small 2-gallon gas can in the back of his truck that he carried around. He let me put it into my car for free. Then he gave me directions to the nearest gas station. After he left, I was able to make it to the gas station, which was only like 2 miles away. It was a long night, but I finally made it home.